Greetings and welcome to today's exciting Roots Magic webinar. My name is Michael Booth. I'm Vice President of Roots Magic and one of its developers. And also with us this evening is Bruce Busby. And Bruce, of course, is President of Roots Magic and its author. And tonight's webinar is a little bit different from our past webinars because we'll be talking about a product other than Roots Magic. Tonight we're going to be talking about our personal historian software and how you can use it to bring life to your life stories. And I will be doing the main demonstration since I am the original author of the personal historian software. Personal historian software was developed to help you overcome the obstacles to writing a personal history. Over and over again, as I give presentations and teach classes, a fun question I like to ask is how many of you have started writing a personal history? And almost every hand will go up. Then I'll ask how many of you have finished or at least caught up with your personal history, and most every hand will go down. And there's a lot of interest, a lot of desire to write a personal history, but there's several things which I find get in the way. Okay, the most common 5 are lack of interest or motivation, lack of time, being overwhelmed, a poor memory, and a lack of writing skills. And personal historian, as you'll see, is carefully designed to help you overcome, well, the four later obstacles. The first one, the lack of interest and motivation, that needs to come from within. Can't help you much with that one, but definitely we can do something about the final 4 there. I'm going to switch into the personal historian software. Okay, when you install Personal Historian and you run it for the first time, you'll see the screen that says Welcome to Personal Historian. What would you like to do? You can create a new Personal Historian file, open an existing file. If you aren't sure where the Personal Historian files are on your computer, you can choose this option. That will search your hard drive to find them for you, or it displays a list of the most recent files that you've worked on. A common question that I hear is, can I use Personal Historian to write more than one history? The answer is absolutely. All you need to do is to create a new file for each person that you're writing about. This is a little different than using Roots Magic, because Roots Magic, you'd create one file for an entire family or generations of a family that you're working on, whereas in Personal Historian, you're going to create a file for each individual. And that's because the focus is very different. In Roots Magic, you're focusing on generations and history of an entire family and pedigrees, whereas in Personal Historian, you are focusing on a single individual and trying to create a more detailed narrative history of their life. Okay, and of course, this could be your own life, it could be your parents, grandparents, and ancestor. I even keep separate files for each of my children, so that I have my file, my wife has hers, and we have a separate file for each of our kids. And when something interesting happens, we can just open up their file, add a story for that day, and just write down what happened that day that was interesting or noteworthy. Okay, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to choose Create a New Personal History Project, the very first option. And I'll click OK. And the first thing it asks is to enter the name of the personal history project. This is the file name. You can give it whatever file name you want, but the file name that makes the most sense is obviously the name of the person that you're writing about. And in tonight's demonstration, we are going to pretend we are writing our own history and that we are a man named Ronald Stewart. So I'm going to type Ronald Stewart. I'll ask if we want to replace it. Yes. So it's created this new personal historian file called Ronald Stewart. And then this screen comes up. This is a wizard which guides us step by step through setting up a project. And you'll see the personal historian uses several wizards to accomplish common tasks. And first one, it says, I will guide you through the steps of creating and setting up your new personal history project. Click Next to begin. So we click Next. It asks, who is the subject? Who are you writing a history about? And the choices are myself, another individual, or a family. And by a family, personal historian is referring to a husband and wife and children, that kind of family, an immediate family, as opposed to 4 generations of Johnsons or something like that, that you would deal with in Roots Magic instead. So I'm going to choose myself, and I'll click Next. Then personal historian asks if I would like to import my genealogy. This is an optional step, but it can be a big time saver. If you think about your own personal history, your own life story, what are the events that are important in your life story? Obviously, when you were born, when you were married, when you graduated from college, but also events from your family's life, like when your grandparents died, when your children were born, things like that are all important parts of your own personal history. And it just so happens that those are the types of events that if you use genealogy software, you've likely already typed all of those names and dates and perhaps even notes into your genealogy software already. So instead of typing all that into Personal Historian again, Personal Historian can save you a bit of time by loading that in from your genealogy software. So it says, do you want to import it? I'll just say yes, click Next, and here's the wizard to guide me step by step through importing my genealogy. I will click Next. The first question it asks is, which genealogy software do you use? Personal Historian can import from Family Tree Maker through version 2006, from Legacy, from Path version 5, and it can also, of course, read a Roots Magic file. If you don't use any of those programs, it can import a GEDCOM file. Okay, so in this case, I do happen to have a GEDCOM file. So I'm going to click GEDCOM file, then click Next. Then it asks for the file name, and you can just enter the file name here. Or if you aren't sure where your GEDCOM or your genealogy file is, you could click on this button that says Search for Files. It will search your hard drive and find them for you. I happen to know where the file is, so I'll click Browse, and it allows me to choose the file by hand. I'll click Next. Then it loads all of the names from the file, and it asks, who is this history about? Who are we writing about? And it presents a list of everyone that was in that file. And you'll see that they're sorted by surname and given name. I could either just scroll down through the list, or anytime in here, I just start typing the name. So we're writing out Ronald Stewart. So I'll type S-T-E-W-A-R-T, comma, R-O-N-A-L-D. Okay, and it's brought me to Ronald Stewart, found me in the file, and then I click Next. It asks, which relatives do you wish to import? And you'll see that there is a list of relationships like self and spouses and children and grandchildren, and each one has a checkbox next to it. If we scroll down to the bottom, you'll also see other relations, and it, by default, is not checked. One common mistake I've seen people make is they click Select All, and what is that going to do? That is going to bring into your personal history all of those third and fourth cousins, twice removed, all those distant relatives that, while they are important to your family history, they are not necessarily a part of your personal history. So feel free to be picky and choosy. with this list. If there happens to be a certain nephew that you really didn't like, that you never ever saw and was basically dead to you, you can just click on this plus sign, and it opened up nieces and nephews, and it displays all the nieces and nephews here below, and you just click on the check mark, and he will then be excluded from your personal history, meaning the events from his life will not be brought into your history. Okay. Once I have chosen the relatives that I want to import, I click Next, and then it says which events do you want to import, and it gets this list of events from your genealogy file. In this case, I've got the classics, the vital statistics like birth, death, and marriage, but I also have other events like graduation, military service, occupation, residence, and so on. These are all events which I typed into my genealogy software, and pretty much all the major genealogy softwares out there, including Roots Magic, allow you to enter in all these non-vital statistics, all these additional types of events, and most will even allow you to define your own, create your own types of events. Okay, and the great thing about these events is they add color and context, and they make the person more interesting. So as you're using your genealogy software, be sure to record graduations or residence or occupations or military service, things like that, as you encounter that information. Just as an aside, one of my favorite events that I like to record is left-handed. Just a type of fact that I like to record for my ancestors because I'm left-handed, and I like to find out who else is also left-handed and keep a record of that, just as an aside. But I choose which events that I want, and I click Next. Then it asks for a time span of events that you wish to import. The default is all events from the lifespan of the main individual. And in the sample file, Ronald died in 2001, but we're going to be optimistic and pretend he's still alive. So I'm going to change this from 2001 to 2011. Okay. You'll find as you use these wizards that if you're in doubt which option to choose, Personal Historian has already chosen the most commonly used option by default. So when in doubt, just stick with what's already been selected for you. Okay, so I will click Next. Oh, and down here it says import items which do not have dates. These would be facts that are in your genealogy file. Like I said, the left-handed, things like that, which don't have a date. Well, unless you count the date that he lost his right arm in an industrial accident, he became left-handed on a certain date. Most facts like that do not have dates, and so you can just check that checkbox to import those items. Things like left-handed or twin or social security number, things like that. Okay, so I will click Next, and it asks category. In which category do you want to place the imported items? Okay, as we will see, every topic, every story in Personal Historian can be assigned to a category. This allows us to do lots of fun things later on, like filtering, sorting, organizing these stories, just basically keep things grouped together. So I will just go right here, and the name of the category that it wants to put them into is the same name as the genealogy file that you're importing. So I'm going to change the name from Sample GEDCOM to Family History, something a little more descriptive of what we have. And then I'll click Next, and it says Ready to Import. I click Import, and notice behind me, this is my main screen in Personal Historian behind this wizard. Right now it's completely empty. There's nothing there, but as soon as I click Import, bam. It's now full of all these events which came from came from my genealogy file. You'll see Ronald Logan Stewart was born. Here's the date and Ronald's age at the time when his brother was born, and so on. They aren't sorted chronologically yet. When I'm done with it, going through the steps of this wizard, they will be sorted chronologically. Okay, someone asked, can you add the nephew later on if you change your mind? Yes, at any time you can import your genealogy file again into your personal historian file. Okay, but continuing on with this wizard, it asks to confirm some personal information, like give a name, surname, known as, I'm going to change this to Ronnie. There's the gender, birth date, and death date. And of course, Ronald is still alive, so I'm just going to make that blank. I'll click Next. And the next thing it asks is if I want to import any live capsules. Now, live capsules are packages of timelines, events, prompts, memory triggers that help you write your personal history. These all come with the software. It's optional. I could just say no thanks, but if I do want to import any of these live capsules, I click yes, and then next. And here it says import live capsules. And just as a little aside, again, this little picture right here, this is my oldest son when he was about 2 years old, sticking out his tongue. And that's in the software, so even though he is 10 years old today, he's sticking out his tongue at all the thousands of personal historian users around the world. So I'll click Next. And it asks which live capsule do you wish to import. And this is the list of live capsules which come with the software. There's British history, epidemics, Industrial Revolution, inventions, LDS history, memory triggers, movies, music, radio shows, television, toys and games, U.S. history, and U.S. holidays. Many of these timelines go back several centuries, such like U.S. history is going to go back to the 1600s, British history back to the 1200s, epidemics and inventions also go back several centuries. Television, of course, will not go back quite that far. This means that personal historian is very useful for not just creating a history of your own life, but also the lives of ancestors. For example, let me give an example of a great-grandfather who we knew from history that my grandmother had written of him that he had had a job stringing up electrical power lines from city to city. And we didn't know much more than that. But in our minds, it just looked like, yeah, it was probably just a menial job, just some casual labor that he had to try to make a few bucks for something that he probably wanted to do more importantly. But as we created a history for him and we brought in the inventions, life caps, the inventions timeline, we saw that Edison had invented the light bulb just a very short time before my great-grandfather got this job stringing up power lines. And suddenly what had in our minds been a menial manual labor job suddenly became a high-tech, exciting job for a young man in his early 20s to have. So I encourage you to use personal historian not just for yourself, but for your ancestors. I think you'll be surprised some of the context and ideas that you see when you take the events from their life and superimpose them upon historical events.
Mike.
A couple questions here. Yeah?
We've had a couple of questions about, is it possible to create your own life capsule?
Yes. And if you go to rootsmagic.com/lifecapsules, there are a few life capsules that other users have made. And there's also a link to download a life capsule editor that you can make your own timelines with. And we are also working on new timelines Like someone asked about Australian history. Yeah, we definitely have Australian history coming, as well as some others that have been requested. Okay, one other thing about the life capsules. You'll notice that there are two types of historical timelines in this list. What I like to call hard history and soft history. By hard history, it'd be like the British history and U.S. history or Australian history. Those are timelines that most people think about, like when did so-and-so became president, when this battle was fought, when this treaty was signed. Those are all part of these hard history timelines. Then there's soft history, things like movies, radio shows, music, what toys came out at a certain time. These soft history timelines are very important for a personal history because one, they make it more interesting for the reader. If you can kind of pepper these little details about what was popular at the time, what the culture was like at the time, it makes it much more interesting for the person reading the history. But second of all, remember one of those obstacles was memory? If you incorporate some of these soft history timelines into your history, it will instantly help you with your memory. It's interesting how many of our memories are associated with a song or a toy or a book that we had as opposed to when a certain treaty was signed. Okay, so those are definitely there to help you with your memory. So let's bring in just a few of these life capsules. I'm going to bring in, I will bring in U.S. history. Let's start with that, U.S. history. So I choose U.S. history, click Next. It even breaks U.S. history down into smaller categories that I can pick and choose. Became a state, seceded, war, historical events, and presidents. I can choose the time span of events to import. I'll just stick with the default. In the category, it's going to put them in U.S. history. And I'll click Import, and suddenly in the background, now I have these events from my genealogy file, and then I have all these events with little American flags. So that's the U.S. history timeline coming in. Okay, so I'm going to click Yes, import another life capsule. By the way, I see that there's a lot of questions about, do you have such and such a life capsule? We would actually appreciate getting input on that. So if you could send an email to lifecapsules@rootsmagic.com and just with your suggestion, and if you have any idea of a good place to get the information for these timelines, any recommendations, we would appreciate that. Like I said, we are currently in the process of beefing up and adding quite a few new life capsules. Okay, so if we want to bring in a life capsule, we just say another one, I'll say yes, click Finish, and it brings me to the list again. This time I want to bring in a soft history, so why don't we bring in movies. Bring in movies, and it breaks down movies into different genres, and I'll say I'm just going to unselect all. Let's see, I like the action and adventure, I like animated and comedy, and musicals. Okay, and then I click Next. Ask me for the time span of events again. And by the way, this time span of events is useful because it gives you control over, well, what time span of events you want to import. This can be helpful if you have, for example, an ancestor who emigrated from England to the United States. You could import the British history just for the certain years that he lived in England. And then you could import the U.S. history just for the years that he lived in the United States. Or in the case of the toys life capsule, you could import just the toys that were popular between your birth and say 18 when you stopped playing with toys. Okay, and so we put in the category of movies, and I'll click import, and suddenly I now have movies in my list, and I'll click yes to import one more, and that will be the memory triggers life capsule. Now the memory triggers is a little bit different than the others because it is not a timeline. Memory triggers is a list of questions, about 1,300 of them, that are grouped by subject. And memory triggers are actually what most people think about when they think of something to help you write a personal history. Things like, who was your best friend as a child? How did you become friends? Did you have any childhood enemies? How did you become enemies? Just a bunch of questions to give you ideas of stories to write. Memory triggers, of course, if you're writing your own history, you want to include those memory triggers. But also, if you are writing a history about someone, you're going to go interview them, say orally, it's great to create a personal historian file in advance for their life, import that memory triggers life capsule, and then when you go to their house, you set up your tape or audio recorder or your camcorder, whatever you're going to do. You can then just go through the memory triggers as questions to help you interview them. So I'm going to click memory triggers and import those. Then it says, would you like to import another life capsule? I'll say no, I'm finished importing life capsules. And it says, that's it. Your personal history project is now ready to go. And if I scroll through this list, I can see all these memory triggers, movies, U.S. history, and family history events in my personal timeline here on this main screen. At any time, I can go to File, then Import. On the main menu, I can choose Life Capsule if I want to import new life capsules in the future. I can click Genealogy if I want to import my genealogy file again. Or if I've created a timeline in a program like Excel, I can import that timeline using this text file option. Okay, let's say I'm looking at this main screen and I've got several columns. The first one is for the status. Second column here is the title of the event or the story. This next column is the date. Next column is the age, category, and here's the date that it was modified. Now I'm going to, just because our screen is a little bit smaller for this webinar, I'm going to stretch this column out to make it a little easier to see. Okay? Let's say I'm looking at this and I decide, you know what? I've got all these events, but I really want to make the family history events stand out. Okay, so I'm going to go to, in order to do that, I can go to Topics, then Edit Categories. This gives me a list of all the categories that are in my file, like family history, the memory triggers, movies, and U.S. history. All these categories that I created when I set up my file. I can click on any of these categories, and down below I can edit that category. I can change the title. I can change the icon. So if I don't want this boring old piece of paper, I can click change the icon, and I could do, say, this nice green book. The text style allows me to change how it's displayed on the main screen in my personal timeline. So I'm going to click change style, and I'm going to change the color to, I don't know, a nice bold green. And I'm going to change the style to bold. I could also do italic, underline, or strikeout. So bold. So now it shows me the sample text in this little box. I've got this green, bold text just for family history. So when I click close and I look on the main screen, if I scroll down, suddenly all of those events that came from my genealogy file really stand out. They're in a nice bold green color. So it's easy for me to distinguish there in the file. Let's say after working with my file, I decide, you know, I really made a mistake. I didn't want those movies in my file. I could go to Topics, Edit Categories, and then I select Movies, and over here on the right there's a button to remove the category. And this will allow me to either transfer all of the topics that are assigned to the Movies category, mark them as unfiled, move them to another category, or to just delete them all outright. So I could click Delete them, and it would just remove them completely from the file. Okay? Now, what if I wanted to remove the movies just temporarily? In other words, I just want to remove them out of my site so I can concentrate on other stuff. Up here there's a button called Filter, and this allows you to filter your list of topics. Down here at the bottom it shows me that I have 423. I can filter that down, narrow that down based on whatever criteria I like. If I click on Filter, it brings up a screen where I can set options to filter by the title, by the date or age, the category, the status, the date that the topic was last modified or changed, and the date when it was created. So I could go right here to Category, and it presents a list of all the categories, and I just uncheck Movies, or I uncheck Memory Triggers. I then click Apply Filter, and now my list is much more concise, only showing events from U.S. history and my own family history. Okay, to remove that filter or to change it, I just click on the Filter button again. I could change the options, or I click Remove Filter to show all of the topics again. Okay, up here at the top, next to the Filter button, there are several buttons that you'll use very commonly. First one is Add Topic. This adds a new item to my list. If I click Add Topic, it brings up this Add New Topic screen. It allows me to enter in a title, a date, or an age. And we'll get to this later. I'm going to close this screen. It's kind of big because, I need to make that smaller. Okay, the next button is to delete a topic. So let's say looking here, I've got Mrs. Doubtfire. I hated that movie. I'm not interested. I don't want it in my timeline, so I'll click Delete Topics. And I can delete that item, remove it permanently from my list, a la carte. I have nothing against the movie Mrs. Doubtfire in real life, but again, we are Ronald Stewart, and he did not like that movie. So, if I want to edit any of these existing topics, I just select it, and I could either double click on it, or I could click the Edit button, and it brings up the Edit screen. Let me just resize this down for the size of screen we have so it doesn't keep causing problems for us. Okay. Then the next button is actually my wife's favorite button. It's this little piece of paper that's coming out of a top hat. This button will pick a topic for you at random from your list, one that you have not written about before. She can never decide what she wants to write about on a given day, so just click on here and it picks one for you. In this case, it picked The Goodbye Girl, coming to movie theaters. And then this last button is to add a journal topic. This is a very simple button. All it does is creates a new item for you, fills in the title with journal entry, and automatically fills in today's date. Okay. one other thing I want to show you on the main screen, you've no doubt noticed this bar along the top. And inside of it is this graph with a bunch of little tiny bars. Each one of these bars represents a year in the subject's life. In fact, down here it says year, and it has 1935, 1950, all the way up to the present year. Up above, it tells you the age, 0, 15, 30, and so on. Each bar represents a year, and the height of the bar tells you how many stories you have for that year. Okay? So, just looking at this visually, I can see that most of my topics and stories are clustered around this area between my 20s and 30s probably, and down here as I get farther on, I've got some holes over here. I don't have a lot of information here on the tail end. And so it can give you a good idea of where you need to concentrate to fill in gaps in your history. Okay, then you can just go through this list. Once you use the wizard, set up a new file, it's a fun and exciting process to just look through this list. And instantly you will see things that you'll want to write about. You may have something that you want to write about directly, like, oh, here my brother was born when I was almost 7 years old. So you can double click on it. It brings up this screen, and over here in the composer, I can write about my brother's birth. Just a reminder, if you had entered in notes for your brother's birth into your genealogy software, those notes would already be here in this little word processor. So it will import your notes as well. I'll click Save, and you'll see that I now have next to the title, the little icon, this box, which used to be an empty box, now has a little pencil in it. That tells me that I have written something about that particular topic. If at any time I could open up my file, double-click on this topic, it will bring up the word processor, and all my work is right there. I can continue typing, writing about it, editing it, or I could even go in here just to print this particular story. Okay, so looking at your list, you'll see lots of stories that you want to write about directly. You may see some that you'll want to write about indirectly. Okay, for example, we'll move forward in time, and we will see The Sound of Music. Okay, here's an example of The Sound of Music. Now, let's say that I don't want to write anything about The Sound of Music directly. Okay, I like the movie, but I don't really have any stories. It's not really part of my personal history. But just looking at that, it reminds me of these old neighbors of ours that we used to play bridge with. We used to play bridge every Wednesday night with them for a few years while we were neighbors. And seeing The Sound of Music, I remember that, oh yeah, I remember it was right about when we started playing bridge, we went to see The Sound of Music together because our wives wanted to go see it, and so they took us there to the movie theater to see it. But now, without writing about The Sound of Music, I can look at this date, and suddenly, oh, that was March of 1965. So now I have a context. I now remember the Johnsons when we played bridge together, and I know when it happened. So excitedly, I come up and I click Add Topic. Brings up this screen, and for the title, I'm going to say Bridge with the Johnsons. The date, I'm going to say that was 1965 through 1968. Okay? I could type in full qualified dates with day, month, year. I can do date ranges, partial dates, type in whatever date I want, and you'll notice as you type in the date, it automatically filled in the age. The opposite is true as well. If you don't know the date, you can type in the age and it will automatically fill in the date. So I do Bridge with the Johnsons, I've given it a date, and now I can write about our weekly bridge games with the Johnsons. Okay? I can even go up here to category, and I could assign it to any of these categories I have already, or I may want to just create a new one. So I'll click Edit Categories, add a new category, and I'll call this suburban life, or we'll call it married life. And I could give it its own little icon. So I'll put a little white flag for married life and click Close. And then I'll just choose married life. Okay, so now I click Save, and Personal Historian keeps track of the story for me. It just saved it. It put it in its place in my little timeline. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to mess with it until I'm ready to publish my history. It just keeps it tucked away, nice and safe. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the editor, because this is where some of the coolest, most underutilized tools in Personal Historian are hidden. If I click Add Topic, it adds this new screen here, and for the title, I can type my first job, or I'll do my first car. The date, I don't remember the date, so I will go to the age, and I'll type 17. And it automatically filled in the date, and it calculated very literally when I was 17, that was on August 27th, 1952. That was the 17th birthday. I know it wasn't exactly my birthday, so I'll just change this. I know it was a few weeks later, so I'll say this was about October 1952. Okay, so about October 1952 was when I got my first car. Now, my first instinct is to go right here in the composer, that's your traditional word processor, and just write about my first car. But that would be a big mistake for a number of reasons. First of all, by just jumping in and writing here in the composer, I am going to forget details. I'm going to do a lot of cutting and pasting, and I'm going to be pausing, wondering what to write next, and it's a very overwhelming process to write in that manner. Over here on the left is this, on the left you'll see this tool which is marked Organizer. This is one of the hidden gems in Personal Historian. You can think of this as a little notepad tool that you have for each topic in your file. So I just click on this plus sign, and this little blue dot appears with a box and a blinking cursor, and I can type something. I'll hit the edit key, and another blue dot appears, and I can type something else. And again, something else. And I can keep on going and going and going. It's a very easy, very natural way of just jotting down notes. Now, if you're writing about an ancestor, a story about an ancestor, you may be doing research, and this would be a good place to keep those notes together. But if you're writing about yourself, this becomes a very powerful brainstorming tool. And in brainstorming, the idea is to get everything out of your head and onto the paper, or in this case, into the software. You don't worry about spelling. You don't worry about writing complete sentences. You don't worry about the order, or if you're even going to use the information. The idea is to just get everything you can think of about a topic onto the computer screen. So in this case, we'll do my first car. Okay, so I know that my first car. Let's see what I know about it. It was an Edsel, yes, one of those, back in 1952, and I thought it was cool at the time. And let's see, I bought it used, and it cost me at the time, it cost $500. Let's see, and I saved for over a year to get that 500. In fact, I had an after-school job, and I also had an extra summer job, and that was planting potatoes. Okay, and let's see. Now that planting potatoes, yeah, that was hard work, but as I was baking in the sun, the thought of a car just kept me going. And I just keep going through the list, thinking about my first car. I type in the idea, the thought, and then I press the enter key. Okay, now I can take these items, once I've tapped out my memory, I can take these and using the mouse or using these toolbar buttons up here, these little arrows, or using the keyboard, I can rearrange these items. I can move them around. So if I wanted to put planting potatoes, let's say I wanted to put baking in the sun before hard work. I am holding down on the mouse button, and I go right here above hard work, and I let go. Oops, I went too far. Okay, I can also drag something. I can drag an item into another one. So planting potatoes, I can, holding down the mouse button, and I put it right on top of an extra summer job, let go of the mouse, and bam. Look at that, it's indented, and this changed from a blue square to a blue triangle. I can click on this triangle, and I can collapse it. And I can hear those wheels turning in your heads out there and or through the internet, and I can hear you thinking, wait a second, if I can do that, this is starting to look an awful lot like an outline, and that is exactly what you're trying to create. You brainstorm, typing in all the details you can think about, rearranging them, reordering them, and then you repeat the process. As I rearrange these, I'll think of more details, like the $500. I may remember, oh yeah, Dad promised if I saved 400, he would pay the other 100, or something like that. I may start remembering other details that I can quickly and easily add. And before I know it, I have an outline. Just like from junior high English class, when my English teacher, before we would write an essay, the English teacher would say, oh, you need to write your outline. You need to outline exactly what your points of your essay are going to be before you start writing. And I hated that. I just wanted to start writing my essay. I didn't want to waste time with the outline. Well, guess what? My junior high English teacher was right. If you spend an extra amount of time up front writing an outline, you end up saving time in the long run. Like I said earlier, with an outline here on the left, I can just start writing the story right here in the composer. I don't have to keep stopping and pausing and struggling to think what I'm going to write next. I don't have to keep copying and pasting and rearranging paragraphs and sentences to get something that flows. And I will end up saving time in the long run. The other thing that doing brainstorming and outlining will do for you is they will help you with your memory. Remember, that was one of the big obstacles, writing problems with memory. If you go through brainstorming exercises, and I hear this over and over again from people who I've taught this class to, they say, wow, I'm amazed at the details that I've remembered by brainstorming. I remember things that I forgot that I've forgotten by doing this. And so please take that extra bit of time when you're writing to go ahead and outline, brainstorm before you write, and you will be converted. You will love it, and you'll never go back to the other way of writing. Okay, now pretending we have a story here. There are a couple tools in the composer that I have. You can, of course, do formatting like bold, italic, underline, centering text, moving it to the right or the left. You can also insert pictures. Click Insert Picture and insert the picture. If you have one very large, it'll ask you if it can make it smaller. And it just inserts that picture right there into your history. So here's the family at a parade on the 4th of July. It doesn't have much to do with my first car, but we'll take it. I can resize this picture, select it, resize it, center it. Oops. Add a caption, etc. When I'm done, I just click Save, and it tucks it away. A couple other things, though. There is a spell check. There is a thesaurus. And then right here is a readability check. Now, a readability check, what the readability check does is it analyzes your writing in that particular story. It gives you some interesting statistics like the number of paragraphs, number of sentences, number of words, number of big words, which are words with 3 or more syllables, number of unique words, number of syllables, number of characters, and so on. It tells you number of sentences per paragraph, words per sentence, syllables per word, characters per word, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff that you may be interested in looking at. But this is where it gets very interesting. This is the readability. Okay? Readability, and it says they may be unreliable since there's fewer than 200 words. So it works better when you have a bigger sample of text that you're working from. But the readability attempts to describe how readable, or in other words, what grade level of education someone would need to feel comfortable reading that story. Okay? In this case, since I only have one little sentence, the grade level right here for the fog index is 1.6, meaning a first grader would probably be comfortable reading it. And the same thing with Flesch-Kincaid index is very close to 1. These are just two slightly different ways to measure the readability. Now keep in mind, readability has nothing to do with how well you write. For example, Shakespeare was a very good writer, but he's not the most readable writer. In other words, a 4th grader would probably not be very comfortable just picking up Shakespeare and reading it. Okay? And so what I like to do, I use this readability, I like to aim for an adolescence, so between 6th and 9th grade. So I like to keep this number between 6 and 9 as much as possible, because I figure that will keep it interesting, but also keep it easy enough to read for most people, especially children that I would hope in the future would read my stories and read my history. What usually happens with me, my biggest challenge is coming from a technical background. In technical writing, you try to make yourself sound very smart. So you're trained in all your classes in college to have very high numbers here. And especially the way I write, I have long run-on paragraphs. And so my biggest problem is usually words per sentence will be very high, and sentences per paragraph will be something close to 1. So I run this readability check, and if I get a high number here and a low number here, a high number here, it just tells me I need to go into my story and just add a few periods, just break up some of these run-on sentences so it makes more sense, or so that it's more readable for someone. Okay, so that's the readability check. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now, by looking at this list, you see everything is broken down into bite-sized pieces. And that is by design. In other words, just like the old riddle, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that is the basic concept behind Personal Historian. Most people get bogged down and get overwhelmed and don't have the time to write an entire life story. But by breaking it down into these small bite-sized pieces, looking at this timeline, just writing about something that interests you that day, writing a few paragraphs about a movie or a story or just something that you remembered while shopping in the grocery store. Just spending a few minutes a day, you can make great progress and write a complete and interesting personal history. And so all these obstacles about memory, about time and being overwhelmed and whatnot, all of those are taken care of by using this software, just creating your timeline, writing these stories one at a time in whatever order you like. And then when you're done, when you're ready to publish your history, you click File, Publish History, and here's another wizard to guide you through the steps. Click Next, ask me for a title, if I want to include any empty topics, or in other words, stories that don't have anything written in them, and I'll say no. And group things together by category and click Publish. And let's see. I don't have a lot written here, of course. In this hour, we've just written a few sporadic sentences, but you'll see that it's taken these stories, what I have written, it's put them together. It's even broken them down by chapter and included pictures. And I can take this history then, I can now print it directly to my printer. I can save it as an Acrobat PDF file. And that is perfect for emailing to family members, or if you want to take it to a print shop and have it printed in a nice book. They love a PDF file because it will look on their system, for the most part, exactly like it looks on your computer. Or if you would like to do further enhancements and tweaking that you can't do in Personal Historian, you can click Save as RTF. This will save it to a rich text file that you can then import into your word processor like Word or WordPerfect or OpenOffice, Write, or you could bring it into a publishing program like Microsoft Publisher or PageMaker or InDesign. So it's very easy to get information into Personal Historian, and it is very easy to get all of your writing and stories out of Personal Historian. One question that someone asked is how much formatting is lost when you save to rich text, and you really do not lose any formatting saving it to rich text. Just how we do it, in fact, the underlying engine behind Personal Historian uses rich text or RTF as its native format, so it comes out as a very clean RTF file. Okay, so that is our basic demonstration of Personal Historian. So let's open it up for just a few minutes to questions.
Okay, we have a couple here. One person's asking about importing types of files into stories. You want to handle that?
Oh, sure. It's not uncommon to already have stories written in your word processor like Word, and you want to bring them into Personal Historian. So in order to do that, you first need to create a new topic, and you'll see up here under Insert, you have Insert File, and this allows you to choose a rich text file and some other basic files, but it allows you to import an RTF file into Personal Historian. Now, the easiest way that I have found is copying and paste, because usually when someone has written something in Word, they've written multiple stories in a single Word file. And Personal Historian works best if the stories are each broken out into their own separate topic. That'll gives it the greatest flexibility for sorting and filtering and all that fun stuff. So what I always recommend is you just open up Word and you open up Personal Historian at the same time. Go into Word. If you've written the story about your birth in Word, just highlight the part about your birth, copy that, and then go into Composer in Personal Historian and paste it. And the copy and paste will bring over formatting like bold, italic, underline, and also it'll even bring over pictures using that technique.
Okay, another question. Is there a nice complete personal history online for an example that they can see? I don't know that we have any online, but do you have like a sample, an actual sample one where they can kind of get a view of that in that print preview?
Yeah. Personal Historian comes with a sample file that has quite a few stories already written about Ronald. This one I put some junk in here. Okay, so this is a sample file that comes with Personal Historian, and you'll see some examples of some nice detailed stories. And of course, Ronald is a fictional man, so these stories are all fiction. This is not true, but some of it is brought. See the little Cracker Jack box and engagement ring, things like that, are all brought into this sample history.
Okay.
That comes with the software.
Okay. Another question with the life capsules. There were actually a couple of questions with the life capsules. One of those is, where is the life capsule editor? I finally tracked it down. It's at a long URL, which I did type in and sent that to everybody, so it's in your little thing. But better, if you go to rootsmagic.com/lifecapsules, we will put a link there to that life capsule editor. It doesn't happen to be there right now, but we'll put that up shortly after the end of this webinar. Another question that kind of follows up on that is there's somebody who says they would like to store their life capsules with the built-in ones so that it kind of shows up with the existing ones. Is there a way to do that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, let me bring up that website. This is our website at rootsmagic.com/lifecapsules, and this is where the information will be. And right here, this tells you the folder. Right here. This is where Personal Historian looks for the life capsule files themselves. So if you create your own life capsules and you want them to appear in that list permanently, just put them into this folder.
Okay, another question. What if we don't want each little topic as a chapter? And I'm assuming what they're saying is instead of each topic, or actually each category as a chapter, making it just chronological.
Yes. When you go to publish the history, what it will do is it will give you the option to use the categories as chapters. Okay, so these categories that we have set up, like Ronald, family, LDS, epidemics, movies, music, U.S. history, and so on, these will gradually evolve into the chapters of your book. So you can create one called the early years, the building years. These are just examples in this particular sample file. Devastation, postscript, and so on. You can rearrange the order of these by dragging them around or using the move up, move down button. And you can add as you assign each topic, each story to its own, to a separate category. So I could have 20 stories that are assigned to the early years, 20 of them assigned to the building years, 30 in devastation, and so on. When I go to publish my history, it's going to create a chapter called the early years, and then it's going to pull all of those stories which are assigned to the category early years. It's going to pull them together and append them together into that chapter. So yeah, definitely a chapter can definitely have more than one story in it, more than one topic.
Right, and then also when you do that publishing, it asks you, do you want your book to be broken into chapters? If you select no, then you'll just get a chronological list. All those timeline items will print out in the order you actually see them there on the timeline. Okay, right. Next question, and I'll go ahead and take this one. After your story is written, can you import it into RootsMagic into the publisher? And the answer is yes. There's a couple of ways to do that. You could take the individual stories that you're writing and just cut and paste those into what are called text pages in your publisher. So if you're just interested in a small, some of the individual stories, when you go into the RootsMagic publisher, and if you're not familiar with the publisher, we have a webinar covering the publisher in RootsMagic. One of the chapter types that you can add is in the special sections called a text page. And so you can cut and paste or copy and paste stories into a text page in your publisher. If what you want is a full document with your publisher or in RootsMagic attached to people, not necessarily in publisher, there's a couple of ways you can do that. In RootsMagic, when you go into a person's multimedia page into their media album, usually you think of that, you're adding pictures for the most part to that, but you can also add audio files and video files. But there's a fourth type of item you can add, which is just called a file. You can add a file to a person's media album. And you can add a personal historian file, that .phst file, to a person's media album, so that when you go into that media album, you'll see the little personal historian icon there, and you can double click on that, and that will actually open up personal historian with that personal history sitting there, so you can edit that and work on that right directly from RootsMagic, going right straight into personal historian. A couple of questions. Can they keep this on Dropbox?
Yes, absolutely. Just like any personal historian keeps your entire history in a single file. So in this case, it says this is sample.phst. So if I put that in my Dropbox folder, it would automatically be synchronized online and to my other computers that I have installed Dropbox on. For those of you who have not looked at Dropbox, you may want to look at our webinar on using files and folders in RootsMagic, because we talk about using Dropbox with RootsMagic for the last 15-20 minutes or so. And all those techniques that you use in RootsMagic are equally applicable to Personal Historian.
Okay, have you tested a voice recognition program with Personal Historian?
That's a very good question. Actually, yes. For example, my dad and I, we worked on transcribing my great-grandfather's journal. And so what we did, entering that into Personal Historian, if he'd have a journal entry for a day, we'd click Add Topic, we just type in journal entry, we put in the date of the journal entry, and then we put the picture that we scanned of the journal entry right here, and then below it we would use Dragon Naturally Speaking, and there are other products out there as well, that you just turn it on and then we would read out loud from the journal. We found that that was easier than typing, to just read that journal out loud, and it worked very well for transcribing the journal into Personal Historian. Okay, couple questions about using it on a Mac. You can use Personal Historian. It is Windows software, but you can use it on a Mac, just like Roots Magic. And I'll refer you to our website, rootsmagic.com/Mac, for more information on your different options for doing that. Couple questions on the cost of Personal Historian. If you go to our website, rootsmagic.com, you'll see under products, you've got Personal Historian right here. It is $29.95, available on our website as a CD or by download. Okay. Well, I think we're ready to wrap this up. We will have another webinar next month that will be not so much demonstration of Personal Historian, but actual tips and techniques for writing personal histories in general. So if this is a topic that interests you, I encourage you to go and sign up for that webinar. We'll have next month's schedule of webinars up shortly. And okay, just a reminder, this webinar was recorded and it will be placed online probably within the next few hours at rootsmagic.com/webinars. You can go there to sign up for future webinars. You can also take a survey about what webinar topics you'd like us to cover. And finally, a big thank you all for coming and sharing this evening with us, and good luck writing your personal histories.